Okay, so we're going to work on using information to plug it into the 3 different forms. So your first form is slope-intercept, which gives you m and b, which is your slope and your intercept. So m is your slope, b is your y-intercept, which is where x is 0. Okay, so if you're given your b, you're also given a point. Then we have point-slope form, which gives us a point and a slope. So we, again, are given slope. And then we're given our point, x1, comma, y1. Okay, x1, y1 is your point. I want you to realize it does not have to be any specific point. And when you plug it in, it's going to look opposite. Because what signs are in both of them? They're both minus. So if I plug in a positive 2, I get x minus 2. So now it looks negative, right? What if I plugged in a negative 2? Well, 2 negatives would make a positive. So that's what I mean when I say it looks opposite when you plug it in. Okay? Standard form is our last form, and it gives us the least amount of information. So standard form, the best thing that it gives us is that your slope is opposite of A over exact B, which we also wrote negative A over B. Okay? So knowing those 3 things, we're going to get started. So it says find the linear equation of the line with the y-intercept of 0, 7 and the slope of a half. So knowing that, if we have our y-intercept and we have our slope right away, we can plug it into slope-intercept form, right? So what was my slope? 1 over 2. And what was my y-intercept? 7. So what is my slope-intercept form? Which, remember, is y equals mx plus b. So y equals 1/2 x plus 7.
Why'd you write it there?
Because that's where you write it. So then we also have point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Well, is my y-intercept also a point? Yeah, so all I need for this one to plug in is I need m, I need x1, and I need y1. Well, what's my m? What's my slope?
1 over 2.
And what's my point?
7.
So my x is 0, my y is 7. So when I plug that in, I get y minus y1 is 7 equals m. What's my m?
1 over 2.
Parentheses x minus, well, what's my x1? 0. Now, I do want you to realize that you could also see this one just like this. Why do you think that? Because what's x minus 0?
0. Or
Just x. Okay? So if you subtract x minus 0, it's just x. So it could also look like this. However, if you plug it in and it looks like this, that's perfectly fine because that's right. Okay? You don't have to simplify it. Lastly, we have standard form. ax plus by equals c. Now, on your practice, y'all, I want you to know you're not going to be putting them into all 3 forms. This is just me showing you how to do it with the different information for all 3 forms. On your practice, it's going to tell you 1 form to do. So don't think that this is like every problem. Okay, so with standard form, we know we need A, B, and C. Well, what we know about standard form is that slope is your opposite of A over B. Well, what's the opposite of my top number? -1 over my bottom number. 2. So I already know A and B. But what do I not know? C. So I'm going to plug in what I do know to the ax plus by equals c. So I know A is -1x plus by, so 2y, equals c. I do not know c, so I'm going to put a c. Well, do I know a point, an xy point that I could plug in to solve for C? Yeah, because if that point is on that line, then it's going to give me the correct number. So I'm going to plug in my point, my x, y. So negative 1 times x plus 2 times y is 7 equals C. And then your calculator, negative 1 times 0 plus 2 times 7 gives me 14. So I know C is 14. But before we write it, one thing I need you to know is that A cannot be negative. And what do we notice? A is negative. So what I want you to realize is that we could write it like that, negative 1 x plus 2y equals 14, and we could multiply the whole thing by negative 1. Because when I multiply by a negative, doesn't that cancel a negative? Yeah, so a negative times a negative, this just becomes positive 1x. Negative times a positive gives me negative 2y. And negative times a positive gives me negative 14. But look at your A, B, and C, and what do you notice? Are they just all opposite? Yeah. So could you have just come here and been like opposite, 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 and gotten the same thing? Yes. So the reason I show you that is I wanted you to understand why mathematically, but really you can just make everything opposite and it'll make your A positive. Does that make sense? Okay. Now what if A was already positive? Would I have to do that? No. Only if A is negative. Yes? B and C can be negative or positive all day. It doesn't matter. Only A matters. Yes? Then you need to make them all opposite. But if A is positive, you leave them all alone. So we're about to do one where A will be positive. So watch. So look at number 2. So it says find the linear equation of, with this point, negative 1, 5, and slope negative 2. I want you to realize that's not my y-intercept. Okay, I only know my slope and a random point. So which one is it going to be the easiest to plug in right away? Point slope. So my y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. So I know I need m, yes.
Why wouldn't 5 be the intercept?
Because your y-intercept is where x equals 0. Yeah, so x is not 0 here. So what's my slope? Negative 2. And what's my x1?
Negative 1.
And my y1? So when I plug it in, I get y minus y1 equals m is negative 2, parentheses x minus x1, which is negative 1. Well, doesn't that just give me a broken plus sign?
Yes.
So this becomes x plus 1. Are we okay with that?
Oh, we don't have to solve it?
Mm-mm. You're just plugging them in to the proper forms. Okay, so we still need to find slope-intercept form and standard form with that information. So I'm going to start with slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So I need to find my m and my b. Well, what is m? Negative 2. I already know it. So I'm going to rewrite y equals mx plus b, but with my negative 2, because that's the only thing I know. So I know y equals negative 2x plus b. I do not know my y-intercept yet. However, could I plug in this random point and solve for my y-intercept? Yeah, so I know that this is x and this is y. So instead of y, I'm going to put 5 equals negative 2 times x is negative 1 plus b. And what's negative 2 times negative 1? Positive 2. And lastly, how do I solve this? Not divide. Subtract. If there was no plus sign, if it was 2b, you would be right. And what does b equal? 3. So I have y equals negative 2x plus 3. Are we okay with that?
Since we got that stuff, did we just use that one for the rest?
Yeah. No, for this one, yes. So here again, I still need A, B, and C. Okay. And I know my slope is what? which I have to have as a fraction. So how would I make that a fraction?
Negative 2 over 1.
Mm-hmm. And what's the opposite of the top?
Negative 2, positive 2.
And what's the exact bottom?
1.
Do you see how A is positive? So when I'm finished, when I do no C, am I going to have to change everything? No, because A is already positive. So I have 2x plus 1y equals C. We're plugging in what we know. And now we're going to use that random point. And figure out what C equals. 2 parentheses negative 1 plus 1 times 5, and that gives me 3. A is positive, so we're good to go. So what's my form? What's my equation?
2x.
Mm-hmm.
2x plus 1y equals 3.
Yep. Now, do I have to put the 1 in front of my y? No. Is it okay if you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can write it with the 1 or without the 1. Both of them are exactly the same. Any questions with those? Okay, we're going to actually cross off number 3 because it's just like that one. And I learned earlier today that it was a little too much to keep both. Okay, flip to the back. We're also going to cross off number 5. But we are going to do number 4. Because what's different on number 4?
Number 4 has 2 points.
2 points. Does it give me my slope?
No.
But don't I need slope for all 3 forms?
Yes.
So we have to find it. Can you find slope from 2 points?
Yeah.
Yeah, how? Who remembers?
The y.
So remember, it's x1, y1,
Oh.
x2, y2,
Is it the x1 minus
y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Yes, you're on the right track. Okay, so I want y'all to try to find that slope really fast while I take attendance. Okay, so when you plug it into this, what do you get? What's your y2?
Oh, 4 minus 5.
4 minus 5 over
Negative 3 minus 2.
-3 minus 2, which you can simplify on your own, or could you type it in your calculator?
Yeah.
Yes. So here I'm going to do alpha y equals enter 4 minus 5 over -3 minus 2. Because here's something super important, especially for standard form. You have to simplify it if possible. So if you don't simplify it, you could get the wrong answer. So here, what's my simplified slope? 1 over 5. Which if you would have done it by yourself, you would have gotten -1 over -5, and 2 negatives makes a positive. So you'd still get the same thing. Okay, so I know m equals 1/5, and b is unknown. I know m equals 1/5, x1, y1. Well, didn't I already label a point x1, y1?
Yes.
Which point?
The first
Yeah, so what's my x1?
2.
And what's my y1? 5. So I get y minus 5 equals 1/5, parentheses x minus 2.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, but remember on the front when I told you they look opposite? Well, didn't I plug in a +2, +5?
Yeah.
And don't they both look negative now?
Yeah.
So that's what I meant when I put that little note of looks opposite. Okay? Okay, so let's do this one. Again, we're going to plug in what we know to my y equals mx plus b. Okay, so y equals 1/5 x plus b. Does it matter which point I use? No, because if I did my slope correctly, I'm going to get the same number for both of them. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with x1, y1, the point that I've been using. So instead of y, I'm going to put 5 equals 1/5 times x, which is 2, plus b. Now, what do you notice? It's going to be ugly if you don't notice that yet. We have a 1/5 times 2, which is not going to give us a whole number. It actually just gives us 2/5. And now, how do I solve for b? Yeah, we're just going to subtract. So minus 2/5, minus 2/5, and thank God for calculators. 5 minus 2/5 gives me negative 23 over 5. So my b, or not negative, sorry, positive. I don't know why I said negative. 23 over 5. Now, that looks like a weird number, right?
Yeah.
Could we check our work if we're unsure? Yeah, so look, this is going to give me y equals 1/5 x plus 23 over 5. And a y equals equation, can I type that in my y equals? And I can go to my table. Do I see the point 2, 5? 2, 5. Do I also see the point negative 3, 4? Yes. So is it correct? Yes. Okay, so knowing that, last but not least, we're finding standard form. So what do we know? Well, we know our slope is 1/5. So what's the opposite of the top? Negative 1. And what's the exact bottom?
5.
Okay, and we still don't know c. So I'm going to write what I do know. Remember, this is ax plus by equals c. And I'm going to plug in a point. Again, it doesn't matter which one. I'm going to stick with the same one I've been using. So I have negative 1 times x is 2 plus 5 times y is 5 equals something. Negative 1 times 2 plus 5 times 5 gives me 23. Now, am I ready to write it in standard form? No, why not? A is still negative. So what do I need to do? Make everything opposite. What's the opposite of negative 1? What's the opposite of positive 5? What's the opposite of positive 23? There you go. Now you can plug it into your formula. So 1x minus 5y equals negative 23. Any questions with that? Because a was negative. Remember, a cannot be negative for standard form. So we just made everything opposite to keep it equal. Okay, on number 6, we're not going to go all the way through it, but I'm just going to point out that you can find all the information you need from a graph, right? What are the 2 things we need to find all of this? Slope and 1 point. Does it have to be the y-intercept? No, we can still find it, right? So just a reminder, can you find slope and 1 point from a graph?
Yes.
Yeah, but can you find your y-intercept to be more specific?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's my y-intercept?
Negative 2.
Negative 2, which if I wanted to write as a point, what would it be?
0, negative 2.
0, negative 2. So there's my point. And how do I find slope?
Rise over run.
Rise over run. So here's another point. I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, which means negative. And then I'm going to go right 1, 2, which means positive. So my slope is negative 3 over 2. Using that, could I find all 3 equations?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we're not going to go all the way through them because we've done it quite a few times and we're not done yet. Does that make sense? Okay, we good with that? Cool. Flip to the back whenever you're done. Or the next. Okay, I know this looks like a lot, but 6 of these are or 5 of these are super quick and simple because they're special cases. Only 2 of them need a little bit of math. Okay, I'm also not doing all 3 forms anymore. We're just doing standard form. So parallel means what about slopes?
They never cross.
They never cross. So what's the slope?
0.
No.
No, the same.
They're the same. Parallel have same slope. They are exactly going to be the same slopes. Who remembers what perpendicular slopes look like?
Cross. So
opposite and
Cross.
opposite. It starts with an R.
Reciprocal.
Reciprocal. Opposite just means positive versus negative. So if it was positive, it becomes negative. If it was negative, it becomes positive, right? Okay, reciprocal means it's a flipped. So like 4 is the same as 4 over 1, right? So if I flip that, what does it become? 1 over 4. So that's what I mean by flip, okay? So opposite flipped, same slope. So this first one says, write the equation of a line passing through 6, 2, and parallel to this equation in standard form. Well, what's the slope of my old equation? And if this is parallel, what's my new slope going to be? 4 over 5.
Yeah.
Parallel means exactly the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, I'm going to find A, B, C, because it wants standard form.
Oh, 6.
Apparently that was amazing. Okay, what's the opposite of the top?
-4.
-4. And B?
5.
5. And we don't know C. So -4x plus 5y equals C. Now are we given a point?
Yes.
Yes, so we're going to plug that point in. So -4 times 6 plus 5 times 2. And whatever that equals is my C. And that gives me -14. Now, am I ready to plug it into standard form? What's wrong?
A is
It's
negative.
negative, so we're going to do opposite, opposite, opposite. And what's my equation?
14 minus 5.
No.
4x
4x
minus 5
minus 5y
equals -14.
positive 14. It became opposite.
Hey, I missed it.
One more with math. The rest are super simple. Okay, write the equation of the line passing through 3, -5, and perpendicular to 8x plus y equals 6. Well, first off, that's in standard form, so it doesn't give me my slope right away. I have to find it. So what's my old slope? Well, what's the opposite of A?
-8.
-8 over B?
Just
1. So my new slope, being perpendicular, what was the opposite of negative?
8 positive.
Positive, and what would this be flipped?
-1.
1 over
1 over
8. No, it has to be positive, because that one's negative. There's my slope. So if you don't want to confuse yourself, you can cross off that other one. If that doesn't confuse you, you can keep it. It's up to you. And it says in standard form, so A, B, C. What's the opposite of the top?
Negative.
Exact bottom? And I'm plugging in what I know. Did it give me a point?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to use that point to solve for what? C. And that gives me -43. But what do I notice?
We have to flip them because
We have to flip them because A is negative. So what's the opposite of -1?
Positive.
What's the opposite of +8?
-8 and positive 43.
Perfect. So we get x minus 8y equals 43. Okay, these last ones are special cases. And I know number 9 only says parallel, but we're going to also talk about it being perpendicular, and you'll see why. So on one side we're going to do parallel, on the other side we're going to do perpendicular. I just sounded out. That's one of those words I can't just write. Okay, it says find an equation of a line that's parallel to the line of y equals 5. What kind of line is that?
Now repeat the question.
Y equals 5. What kind of? Yes, it's a horizontal line. And so what's my slope?
0.
Slope is 0. So my new line also has to have a slope of 0 and be a Hoy equation, right? Because that's parallel, has same slope. So I know it's going to be y equals something. Well, do I have a point that it went through? What's the y of that point?
-3.
There's your answer for parallel. Okay? And if it tells you standard form or slope-intercept form, it doesn't matter. It always looks the same. Okay? Now, perpendicular. So this is what I want you to think about. If I have a horizontal line, what's perpendicular to that?
-3.
Vertical.
Vertical void. Vux.
Vux, yes. Okay, so knowing that, what I want you to see also, because parallel, my slope here is 0, correct? For y equals 5. If I had to make 0 a fraction, it would be over 1. And if I had to flip that, what would it become?
1.
Over 0 and negative. Now, are you allowed to have a 0 on the bottom?
No. So.
No. Remember, this is okay, no. So this would become undefined.
No.
So what's perpendicular to a Hoy equation? A Vux equation. So Hoy is perpendicular to Vux. And vice versa. Vux is perpendicular to Hoy. So Vux means it's an x equation. And what does x equal?
-2.
There you go. So don't let your special... Because I know that for this y equals 5, isn't that a Hoy equation which tells me 0 is your slope? And if you have to make a number a fraction, don't you always put 1 underneath? So what I was proving to you is why it's undefined. So if I were to flip that, it would become -1 over 0. That's my opposite reciprocal, right? But if you type that in your calculator, it's going to say error. 2 R's. Which just means it's undefined. So that's just proving to you why Vux is perpendicular to Hoy and Hoy is perpendicular to Vux. Okay, last 4 goes super quick. It says find an equation of a vertical line. Vertical line stands for Vux. That goes through this point. Well, vertical, undefined, x equals equation. Well, what does x equal for my point? There's your equation. So try number 11.
Is that parallel?
No, it doesn't say anything about that. It just says find an equation, bless you, of a vertical line through 3, 2. So what would it be?
3.
What? Equation. X equals 3.
X equals 3.
There you go. Super simple.
Oh, yeah?
So what if I set a horizontal line through the point -1, 5?
Wouldn't that be 0?
So what kind of equation is it going to be?
Y equals?
What? Yep.
So y equals 5.
And what would the last one be?
So y equals 2. Oh, we did.
Pretty simple for those.
This is a long
Yes.
video.
I know. It's not too bad. There is